Hey guys, welcome back to Mondays at the Museum. I'm Carrie and I'm here at the Anna Bemis Palmer Museum in York, Nebraska. Yes, it is a Wednesday, but we had 2 snow days, so just humor me. Today we're going to be talking about Teddy Roosevelt. So Teddy was born October 27th, 1858, and he died due to a blood clot on January 6th, 1919 at the age of 60. That makes this past Saturday the 105th anniversary of his death. Now, we've already talked about Teddy in relation to the Spanish-American War and his leadership of the Rough Riders, and I'm sure you've learned a lot about him in history or government classes, so you already know he was the 26th president, all about his New Deal, the whole speak softly and carry a big stick stuff. All these things on their own make him a really interesting figure, but believe it or not, there are even more interesting things about him, to the point that you're like, what? So today, I'm going to hit you with 10 really weird and outlandish facts that you might want to verify. I verified them. I didn't believe half of this stuff. What? Anyway, really interesting dude. So here's 10 weird and outlandish facts about Teddy Roosevelt. Outlandish fact number 1. Teddy Roosevelt saved football. Yeah, who knew? So you have to remember that at the time that there weren't always safety measures in place, right? The rules were very different. There wasn't anything such as a forward pass. That was against the rules. The ball movement for offense really took place with guys locking arms, rushing forward, and using their heads as battering rams. Totally safe, right? Gang tackling was prominent. They had zero to no safety equipment whatsoever. This led to a lot of injuries and even death. So in 1904 alone, there were 18 deaths and 159 serious injuries just because of football. So the press called on schools to ban the sport completely, comparing athletes to gladiators, and became such a big, huge news story that it made it all the way to the top, aka the president's office. Well, Teddy Roosevelt loved football. He thought that it made you strong and it was this proving ground for the battlefield. And his claim to proof was that several of his Rough Rider mates played football, and they went on to dominate at the Spanish-American War. So he's saying this is all because of football. And he asked this direct quote, "In life, as in a football game, the principle to follow is hit the line hard. Don't foul and don't shirk, but hit the line hard." Now, he didn't argue against football being dangerous. He agreed, but he didn't want it to be banned. So what do? Teddy Jr., his son, was actually a freshman at Harvard at the time. He didn't want to see him injured, but he also didn't want him to lose out on the opportunity to play football. So what he did was he gathered several of the Ivy League coaches, that is Harvard, Yale, Princeton, etc., and he summoned them to the White House. Now, this meeting took place October 9th, 1905. Teddy urged them to do away with the excessive violence aspect of the sport and keep it safer. And at this time, the schools agreed to do away with the more brutal acts and keep it clean. Now, this wasn't an immediate win because it took time for the changes to be implemented. It's even said that that year, Teddy's son, Teddy Jr., broke his nose. Some even said that it was deliberate. There was also a Harvard captain who got completely leveled on an illegal hit on a fair catch, and a Union College halfback died due to a brain injury after being kicked in the head. Because it didn't work, several schools dropped football completely, right? And it was rumored that Harvard was next. But again, Teddy couldn't have that. So Teddy brought in those coaches, but also added several leaders from surrounding schools as well to have another safety meeting. And this actually led to the development of the NCAA. Radical rule changes went into effect. This was in the 1906 season. They legalized the forward pass. They did away with dangerous formations. And they also developed a neutral zone between the offense and the defense. Now, these changes did not end the injuries completely, but it was said that fatalities declined and injuries fell sharply. And thus, Teddy Roosevelt saved football. Right? Outlandish fact number 2. Teddy Roosevelt was the youngest president ever. So the youngest 5 presidents go in the following order. You had Obama, 47 years, 169 days. Grant, 46 years, 311 days. Clinton, 46 years, 154 days. JFK, 43 years, 236 days. And then our friend Teddy, who was only 42 years and 322 days old. Want to guess who the oldest president ever elected is? I'll give you a hint. You don't have to look very far. Teddy, of course, was vice president at the time, but when President McKinley was assassinated, then he was promoted. Outlandish fact number 3. Teddy lost both his mother and his wife to illness on the same day. It was February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1884, and these deaths took place only hours apart. So his mother went first, Mittie. She had typhoid fever. Later in the day, he lost his wife, Alice, due to Bright's disease, which has to do with your kidneys. Alice had actually just given birth 2 days prior to their daughter, also named Alice. And remember her, we'll come back to her later. Overcome with grief, as you would be, Teddy completely disappeared from the public eye, left his baby with his sister, and headed to the Badlands, aka the Dakota Territories, where he became a rancher and a sheriff. Outlandish fact number 4. During his time as sheriff, he captured an outlaw. So this took place in a saloon, as all good Western stories do. Shots were fired by this drunken cowboy right as Teddy was entering the saloon. Cowboy then turns his gun on Teddy, calls him Four Eyes because of his glasses, and demands he buy him drinks. Teddy's response is to laugh, which threw off the cowboy so much that Teddy was able to punch him twice in the jaw. The dude falls and hits his head and fell completely unconscious. He was then locked in a shed overnight until he could be transported to jail the next day. Who knew? Outlandish fact number 5, same time period. When his boat is stolen, Teddy's solution is to build another boat, ride it down the river, just to get his first boat back. Okay, his personal boat gets stolen, and it's in the middle of winter. Now, because he can't reach the thieves via shore, because it was a boat, he and his friends build another boat. It takes them 3 days to do it. They build a new boat, they ride it down the river, they find the thieves with the boat. Not only do they do this, but they actually arrest them and take them back into town, split up between the two boats. He was a sheriff at the time, so he had the right to arrest them. Now, for my librarian friends, he was actually carrying a copy of Anna Karenina at the time, and it said that he was reading them poetry and discussing things with him and everything like that. And apparently he took such great care of them during this transport that one of them actually wrote him a letter later in life asking him to come and visit him in jail. Teddy stayed as a rancher and a sheriff until a blizzard wiped out his prized herd of cattle, and at this time he returned to New York. Outlandish fact number 6. Okay, so this isn't really outlandish, but it's somehow news to people. Teddy and Franklin were not brothers, nor were they father and son. Actually, Teddy Roosevelt and Franklin D. Roosevelt were 5th cousins. To make things even more interesting, Eleanor Roosevelt, who married Franklin Roosevelt, was actually Teddy's niece, right? So Eleanor and Franklin were actually 5th cousins once removed, and who gave her away at their wedding? Dear Uncle Teddy, of course. Outlandish fact number 7. Teddy went blind in one eye after a boxing injury that took place in the White House. So Teddy had this thing where he would like to fight against professional boxers, and he dared them to hit him in the jaw as hard as they could. He really enjoyed the opportunity to fight back. One day, he challenges this military aide to a boxing match. The aide's name was Daniel T. Meade. Meade hit him so hard in the eye that it actually damaged blood vessels and possibly even detached his retina, and his eyesight was never the same after that. That took place in 1908. Outlandish fact number 8. The teddy bear is named for Teddy Roosevelt. So this all goes back to a hunting trip. He was on this hunting trip. They were trying to shoot bears. He wasn't having any luck. He couldn't find any bears to shoot. One guy on his staff found this bear, subdued it, tied it to a tree, and was going to let him shoot it. But Roosevelt was like, well, that's not sportsmanship-like, so I'm not going to shoot that. And well, this story then made it to the press, where a local toy maker heard about it, and he developed this stuffed bear, and they named it after Teddy. Outlandish fact number 9. This pertains to his relationship. So remember, he had a daughter named Alice that he had left with his sister when he went off to be all rugged cowboy dude. So the daughter felt like she was abandoned by him and spent the rest of her life trying to make up for that loss of attention. This worked out particularly well when he was elected into office because, you know, when you're in office, the whole spotlight is on your entire family. And Alice took it upon herself to develop some very interesting habits and hobbies that were considered scandalous at the time. Some of these were smoking, staying out late with boys, and interrupting White House meetings. Now, the papers often wrote about her antics, And Teddy responded with this quote, which is my favorite Teddyism of all time. It goes like this: I can do one of two things. I can be president of the United States, or I can control Alice Roosevelt. I cannot possibly do both. Fortunately, the American public loved Alice, even if Teddy and his wife, Edith, he had remarried, didn't always agree with her life choices. So this is great. She became such a colorful person and so outspoken about politics that later in life she was lovingly labeled as the other Washington Monument. She even got banned from the White House for President Taft at the time because she had buried a voodoo doll of Mrs. Taft in the front lawn. She actually died fairly recently in 1980. She's buried in Rock Creek Cemetery. But back to Teddy. Here is our last fact of the day, number 10, and probably the most outlandish of them all. Teddy got shot in 1912 in the chest and went on to give an 84-minute speech while suffering from a gunshot wound. So Teddy decided to break the rules, as one does, and he ran for a third term for presidency, and he did so under the Bull Moose platform. That was his nickname for himself. Don't look at me. I didn't name it. So he's about to give this speech while campaigning in Milwaukee, and he sees a flash, and it turns out this guy, John Fleming Schrank, had shot him. Schrank was quickly taken down by the public. They went ballistic. They're trying to beat up on him. Teddy tells him to stop, asks him to bring this guy forward, so he does. And he asks the guy why he shot him, and the guy refuses to answer. Roosevelt is like, whatever, and he sends him off to the police. But he looks down, he sees the bullet hole and the blood, and decides to cough 3 times to see if it had punctured his lung, as one does when they're shot in the chest. So he coughs 3 times, no blood comes out. Because of this, he deems himself fine, so he can give this speech. And he pulls the script out of his chest pocket, right? And in the wad of papers, there are bullet holes and blood all over the pages. And he's able to then give an 84-minute speech, although he does ask the crowd to be as quiet as possible. And after his speech, he finally goes to the hospital where they take x-rays. And on the x-rays, they were able to locate the bullet right next to the heart. And however, it didn't go through the heart because first it had to go through a heavy overcoat, a steel reinforced eyeglass case, and the giant wad of papers that were his speech made up of 50 pages. Now, people complain about people being long-winded, probably what you're thinking right now in this window, but a few pages less and he would have been dead. For those of you wondering about the shooter, he actually ended up in a mental institution after he claimed he was told to shoot Teddy by the ghost of McKinley in a dream. Teddy was unsuccessful in his bid for re-election, but he didn't disappear completely. After all, it takes more than that to kill a bull moose. He went on to spend his time exploring and writing books. So, now that I've got nearly as long-winded as Teddy's speech there on that fateful day, I'm saying, you do have to admit, anything shorter and he would have been dead, you know, so regardless, I will end my video with this. Teddy, bull moose that you are, it was an honor to research you this week, and I want to personally thank you for your support of Major Orlando Gray Palmer, husband to our founder. Without you and your personal recommendations for his promotion, his military career could have gone in an entirely different direction. And we might be short several treasures that are featured here in our America at War exhibit. And after all, I really only did the America at War theme because of the amount of military stuff that we found. So really, this whole exhibit is Teddy's fault. My goal was to do inventory, not set up a military display. I was perfectly happy going through boxes, but then we kept finding more and more war stuff, and I was like, well, I guess we could do a display at the same time. So in conclusion, everything's Teddy's fault, really. The display, our success, our name change, this video series, it's all because of Teddy. I'm kidding. Mostly. But just in case this is true, in honor of Teddy, make sure to swing by and visit our America at War exhibit before end of day, February 29th, 2024, because as of March 1st, we will be rotating to a new theme. It's going to be really weird. A lot of people have asked me if I want to take it down. I don't want to take it down, but the goal has always been to rotate so that every item in the collection gets its due. The exhibit was a huge success for us, and I'm proud of what we accomplished as a team, but it'll be time. It will be weird, though, and I will probably cry, but don't worry. I'll blame that on Teddy too. We'll see you next week.